Okay, hi there Bert. Thanks very much for your video. I don't have a whole lot of time right now, so I'm going to try and do this in one take, but apologies if it's a bit messy as a result. Yeah, thanks for your video. One of the things you mentioned is that hands sort of don't have the balls, as you put it, to respond to your comments, so I'm going to take up that challenge right now. So I hope you take this as it's intended, just responding to what you said. One of the things that you seem to mention quite a bit is about language redundancy. Now, I'm not a great fan of radio-ease. I think it probably has its place maybe on HF, particularly if you're talking to non-native speakers of English, just to be able to make things a bit more precise and clear for them. But certainly if you're on two people who are native speakers talking to each other, I'm not sure there's a great place for a lot of this abbreviation. I agree with you on that. But I am trained as a linguist, I should say. Done my postgraduate studies in linguistics. Language does have a lot of redundancy in it anyway. It's one of the things that marks out language, human language anyway. It's thought to be mainly because if you get sort of an interruption, or there's a lot of background noise, something like that, it's very easy to miss things. So there's a lot of redundancy built into language anyway. For example, how many times have you said that you're going to call someone on the phone when it's obvious that the phone's the only way you're going to call them? Or you start a letter, I'm writing to say, but a letter is writing. Or you're going to Walmart to go and do some shopping, as if you're going to do anything else in Walmart. So yeah, there is redundancy in language that we sort of build in, and I think a lot of the things that you pick up on are just a hangover of that, basically. That said, I think that probably in the particular case of a call sign for ID, it's a bit different. I've certainly never used it on air myself. I'm not a great fan either, but I think it's what linguists would refer to as topic marking. Basically, what you're saying is that we've been talking about this other topic. I now am going to give my call sign. It's not as an indication to you to change the topic. I want you to carry on talking about what we were before, but this is just to comply with the regulation on IDs. So I suspect that's where it came from, perhaps particularly if it's in the middle of an over. But as I say, I'm not a great fan either, but I suspect that's what it comes from. Another topic you mentioned very briefly was the obesity issue. I'm not a great fan of responding to generalisations, and that was obviously a huge generalisation on your part. What I would say, however, is that in most of the Western world, including here in the UK, we do have a big obesity problem, and one of the sectors that's most affected is the sort of over 50s male. What I would suggest is probably the image of ham radio operators being obese is more to do with that. That our demographic does involve over 50s males as a sort of majority of our operators. Therefore, it's unsurprising that a lot of our operators are obese. I say I'm not going to say very much more than that. I certainly haven't seen a scientific study or anything which indicates that there's some statistically significant link between being a ham radio operator and being obese. I suspect there probably wouldn't be such a study. Another thing you mentioned briefly was contesting. Most contests are about an exchange of information. Sure, the signal report, the 59 or 599 in code, is sort of taken for granted and invariable, but most contests do have some other form of exchange as well. Most commonly it's a serial number that increments per QSO, and you have to get that right. In the case of most contests, you won't get any points for that QSO if you don't have that serial number correct. In some contests, Russian DX contest I believe, for example, you actually get negatively marked on that QSO if you get the exchange wrong. So there is something there about information interchange. And I would suggest that's really useful training for public service operators. I suspect that it's a bit more than 1% of PAMs who do public service operating, but yeah, it's certainly not the majority. I'd agree with you on that, and that's a shame. But it's for me personally, as an operator, it's been really, really good training, having that contest experience. DX style operations, they don't have the serial numbers. Yes, it is just exchange of call signs and serial number, of course, and RST, of course. Yeah, we don't give names, we don't give rig details, we don't give weather information. Why not? Well, basically, if you're somewhere rare, and I'm a DXpeditioner myself, I've been to quite a few islands on the Air Islands, and also a few DXCCs as well, which are not rare, but rarer. You're trying to get as many people in the log as possible. It's about being fair. You don't want to be spending 5 minutes explaining to one guy about what the weather's like if you've got sort of 20 people all trying to call you during that time. The information is widely available, and I think this really responds to you on the fact that amateur radio is becoming linked to the internet increasingly. You know, if you want to know what rig I'm using or what the weather's like, you can go on the web. Almost every big expedition these days has a website. Information published in bulletins, and most of the time as well, a lot of information about the location you're in is on the back of the QSL card, which of course most people you contact will be receiving at the end of it. So yeah, sure, the information isn't given during the QSO, but it is actually exchanged in some other way. As I say, I think this is really, both of these styles of operating are really about operating skill. Like you say, a lot of hams wouldn't be sort of great if they did have emergency traffic to handle. A lot of them would probably not know how to deal with it. But I think that the contesting, the expeditioning angle of it does help us to be able to handle information accurately and very precisely and at speed, which I think are really important skills. And I'd highlight, in fact, that contesting is actually a growth area in the younger proportion of operators. There are a lot of young contest operators. I suspect again that's because contesting allows us gives us the opportunity to practice this sort of operating, which wouldn't be possible in other forms, and the general chit chat, if you like, has moved now to other communication methods, instant messaging, VoIP or whatever. Finally, the big debate over code. I think it's really important that we need to highlight here, and I'm sure you agree with me on this, that CW is still really important, but it was seen as a barrier. And I think that if amateur radio were still promoting ourselves essentially as being based on an early 20th century, end of 19th century technology, we really would be putting off so many people that we wouldn't be able to keep the critical number that we need in the hobby in order to have some sense of security over the spectrum that we occupy. So it was seen as a barrier. I think it's right that it's been removed, but it is still really important. And there are people who are coming through, new operators who haven't done the CW exam. I was one of the last to do the 12 words a minute test here in the UK. But there are a lot of people who are coming through who haven't done CW, who are now learning it sort of while they're operating. I think that's really good. And I'd highlight, especially, I don't know what the situation is over there in the States, but certainly here in Europe, a number of the fastest, most efficient CW operators, by which I mean the people who are well over 100 words a minute, the participants at the annual HST contest conventions, for example, are a large proportion of them are younger operators, and I think that's really encouraging. So anyway, those are just a few comments that I had on your video there, Bert. Thanks again for putting it out there, and for giving us the opportunity to have this debate here on YouTube. I'm Dominic Smith, M0BLF. Thanks for watching.